has a hard time with it. My son loves football, plays football, although we are in contemplation of getting out of it ourselves for him. Um, we had Amalo on, the doctor who Will Smith played in the movie. But now we've got Robert Turner II with us, who's got a book out, NFL Not for Long. Lord have mercy. Some folk gonna be mad at me. And I'm not talking about anybody, any officials. I'm just talking about folk who, I'm talking about fans. You know, even some family members who are not ready to give up on this game that they love and they love watching. Robert W. Turner is with us. Let me tell you a little bit about him real quick. PhD in sociology at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, assistant professor of clinical research and leadership at GW, played football in the USFL, the Canadian Football League, and briefly in the NFL. Dr. Robert Turner. Dr. Turner, good morning. How are you, my brother?
I'm very well. Good morning to you. It's great to be on your show. Great to hear your voice.
Likewise, great to hear yours as well. USFL, you weren't involved with Trump, were you?
Uh, that that is the bane of my existence. But yes, I was originally drafted out of James Madison University to play at Memphis, and then traded to the New Jersey Generals.
Really?
So that is on my CV. Yes.
Did you have any interaction with him?
No, I did not. But if you know anything about him, and the league back at that time was very chaotic. There's
Yeah.
lots of players going in and out, and it was really funny because I was on a team with Doug Flutie and Herschel Walker, but you never knew who your teammates were going to be one day to the next. But we didn't know at the time that's indicative of some of the ways that he runs all of his businesses.
It's interesting. I got a chance during All-Star Weekend to meet the head of the MLB Players Union, Tony Clark, a brother. And, he was explaining to me the benefits that Major League Baseball players have and their union gets for them that players in the NFL still don't benefit from. And yet they are putting their lives on the line every Sunday. That's part of the problem, isn't it? That the NFL players are treated so poorly.
I think that's a big part of the problem. And, it's funny because when I started out to do the project, I probably was more critical of the NFL and didn't really know very much about the NFL Players Association. So I had to start doing a lot of digging and research on it. And I do believe, and this is really tough because I think the players, they need to figure out how to stand up for themselves. I think
Yeah.
the owners have really done a great job in looking after their own interests,
Right.
and the players always seem to come out on the short end. And I think that it will take some big sacrifices, but it can be done and it should be done. And I think it's a great comparison, even historically, with the MLB because they have done a great job for their players, where I think the NFL Players Association has fallen short somewhat for their players.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily trying to knock the NFLPA. I think it's still indicative of the culture of the game. It's like, trying to fix something that may very well be broken to begin with. And I'll come back to that in a moment. The bottom line though is, and I just want to read a little something here in a review. With compassion and objectivity, Not for Long reveals the life and mind of high school, college, and NFL athletes, shedding light on what might best help players transition successfully out of the sport. Because that's really what people ought to be thinking about, even if they're in it now, what life is after football, because eventually it does come to an end, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, people have heard the statistics. It's funny, and Roger Goodell says from his statistics he uses about 6-year average, but almost everyone would be in agreement that the average career length for an NFL football player is 3.3 seasons.
Wow, that's something. And where are you on the physical uh, health revelations we now know in terms of the impact on the brain, the impact on one's physical health, and one's own mortality. Where are you on that?
Well, there's no denying that the NFL is a collision sport. It's not a contact sport. We could say that basketball is a contact sport. We could say soccer is a contact sport. Yeah, they bump into each other. Football is a collision sport. That's what people do is they run into each other. And part of the work that I do since moving beyond the book, I'm funded by the National Institute of Aging, and I'm looking at how traumatic injury, how do people age with brain injury? And from my perspective, I think what fits into that, particularly for football players, is how do they age and how do they deal with, how do they handle their health with traumatic injury? Because even DeMaurice Smith has says that the injury rate for NFL athletes is 100%. So you're going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But what we really want to care about, we really want to understand is how do people manage their health when they leave the game? How are they taught while they're in the game? How are they taught before they're in the game to manage their health? And what we know is that in most instances, the football universe is really there to teach people how to succeed during the game, but they have not done a very good job in helping people in their life transitioning out of the game.
But now that you said it that way, 100% risk of injury. How can you manage your health at all if you 100% at risk of getting injured? I mean, that's your health existentially, isn't it?
It is, no question about it. But I mean, the one thing that the NFL does, and again, college football does, is these guys are in incredible shape. The way that they lift, they're unlike in the days when I played back in the '80s, where you had some rest. Now there's very little downtime. You learn from day to day how to allow your body to recover, how to put yourself in maximum speed, maximum power, strength, maximum recovery time. So these guys do a great job. And yes, there are injuries, no question about it. But if you are working with competent doctors, if you are making sure that you have second opinions, if you are eating well, eating healthy, sleeping well, doing all the things to maintain your body, then many guys that I know, they transition out. They have the bruises, the aches and the pains, they have the arthritis. But by and large, they've taken really good care of their body. And I think that's the key all the way around.
Did you suffer any of the types of injuries we're hearing about today? Are you suffering any after effects from your football career?
Well, not that I know of, but you never know.
Okay.
I was never diagnosed with a concussion, and I don't any of the symptoms that I've read that that are indicative of a concussion. I never had those, but again, during the time that I played, and I think this is the scary part. This is the part that we don't know a lot about, but there used to be in the day you led with your head. They used to tell you to stick your head right in there. And the most important thing back in the day when I was playing is that they always told you to keep your head up. Darryl Stingley, make sure you don't get paralyzed. But the game has dramatically changed. The techniques, the methods that they're using now, they're doing everything they can to keep their head out of the game. But I did suffer when I was in college, James Madison University. I suffered a broken neck, broke a couple bones in my neck. I had a herniated disc. I had broke my brachial plexus, a whole bunch of things. But I would say, through a praying grandmother, lots of great doctors, and some faith, that happened my junior year, and I was able to extend my career beyond that and finish up college, and then go on my journey for 4 years throughout the pros.
Bruh, you said that you didn't have a concussion, and then you just got mad. But I broke my neck. Oh, okay. Oh my God.
Well, it's not as it was a very traumatic injury, and that's part of why I look at the work that I look at now. Yes, everybody's focused on the brain. The brain is very important, but we also know that with the athletes, that the whole body is connected, right? And so I kind of look at a biomedical approach to how are people managing their health? How are they looking at the whole body? What kinds of things are they doing to make sure that they're in good shape? And that's you can't separate, for a football player at least, you can't separate, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense to try to separate a potential head injury, those who may have had head injuries from back injuries, knee injuries, from their obesity. All of those things work together. And all of those things we need to make sure that athletes are smarter, make sure that their families are smarter, make sure that they are proactive in how they're looking at these things. But that's what we want for all men, particularly because the NFL is 70% African American. We want all men, all black men, to look at their bodies in that respect.
Dr. Robert W. Turner, folks, continuing our conversation with him and his book, Not for Long, The Life and Career of the NFL Athlete. So do you think people should still pursue careers in football? You know, as I said, I had Bennett Omalu here, and he was like, his position is no. Do you have children? Do you have?
No, I do not have children, but I do have. I have some nephews that are involved in the game. Very, very close family friends. I don't have my own children, so I have to. That's always a caveat in everything. But I do think that football serves a great purpose for a lot of young men, and particularly for lots of young African American men. And one of my dangers that I have is, as you can see clearly, I really believe in making the game safe, making it as safe as possible. But the game provides a great deal of benefits for people well beyond just the financial situation. And I would say one of the most important things that we have to think about is if we're going to take the game away, what are we going to replace it with? And people say, well, you know, you can play soccer and all of these other things. But I always, to kind of summarize it in a real quick way, as I turn to what the infamous words of Chad Ochocinco says. And he says that as far as black athletes was concerned, you follow the money. If they started providing scholarships, full scholarships in college tomorrow for swimming, you see a whole bunch of black folks jumping in the pool. And so we do know that whether it is the case, whether it's proper or not, the pathway to, you know, the educational opportunity for many young black men is through college football.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Robert W. Turner with us, folks. But yet, I mean, you're candid. I mean, to be frank with you, some of what I'm reading in your book is discouraging because it talks about the short lifespan of a career, the lack of guaranteed contracts. You know, the way my brain works, that's not really extolling a lot of virtue in terms of pursuing a football career. Plus, what we also know is that while the professional sport is trying to combat head injuries and what have you, on the college level, Robert, that's not necessarily a case. Some of these colleges are still having folk hit 5 days a week. So all of that is a little bit concerning to me.
I would have to say I absolutely agree with that on that second point, particularly. I was on a panel discussion with Rebecca Carpenter, who directed the movie Requiem for a Running Back. Her father was an NFL coach, former NFL player, and he ultimately suffered CTE. And I asked her, I said, you know, everything is focused on what the problems are in the NFL, and they are there. And the NFL, it seems to be, they're really trying to get in front of this head situation, one, because they recognize the survival of their game depends on that. But I think you're absolutely right. I'm perplexed as to how come society gives the NCAA such a pass, because the same conditions and exposures and risks are at work for the college football player, but yet we are very willing to turn on a game and watch, you know, tens of thousands of people watch Georgia, you know, play LSU every week or something like that. And I think that that's where we need to put a lot of pressure on these colleges to start treating these players right.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, you talk about contracts in NFL. I'm one of the advocates of college players being compensated too, and they aren't to the extent that they should be, obviously, and that's very unfortunate. Robert Turner, our guest, his book Not for Long: The Life and Career of the NFL Athlete. So, someone like myself, I got a 16-year-old, still plays football. What advice would you give me or other parents of young people who are still interested in the game?
Well, one, I think, again, there's no great formula here other than I think one of the best and most important things, that parents can do is to be involved and to be active, to observe, to make sure that that their kids are being coached by competent people who know what they're doing. Make sure that the coaches are communicating with you. I did a study here in Washington D.C. and what I found out across lines, racial and I guess you could say socio-demographic lines. Youth sports, parents rely on the coaches to tell them when their kid has a concussion. And I think that that's a dangerous precedent because, yes, coaches they care, they're out there volunteering, but coaches can't be the single and only line of defense. Parents have to be actively involved. You have to have that communication with your kid. You have to be able to observe your child. Right. So I think, the most important thing is there's risks in life as far as I'm concerned, but I also think that I talked to a young man who's at University of North Carolina, brilliant young man with academic scholarship that played football for all of his young life. And I asked him, I said, well, why do you play? I said, you have everything else going for you. And he said, well, I just love the game. It just means so much. It gives me so much confidence. There's status about it. There's camaraderie. There's all of these things that you can get from playing football. We know you can get them from other places, but for certain young men, that's, what it means to be a man. And that's why they focus on that game.
Yeah, and a very natural attraction for that reason. The book Not for Long by Dr. Robert W. Turner II, The Life and Career of the NFL Athlete. Very insightful book. Thank you, Dr. Turner, for joining us, and let's talk again sometime, okay?
I really appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on, and your voice is important, and I just want to keep on encouraging you to stay on the front line, and just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, my brother, and you do the same as well. I admire you a great deal, man, okay?
Okay.
All right. Take care now. All right.